Hello, my name is Benji and welcome to Dice vs Cards. Today we visit once again Arkham Horror the card game. And last week we brought you the Rogue Toolkit, aka every worthwhile green bordered card you could ever want to include in your deck. But today we're going to talk about the rogues themselves. We won't necessarily be ranking them, but we will be giving them a comparative rating for both solo and multiplayer. This week's episode is going to focus on the first three released rogues: Skids O'Toole, Jenny Barnes and Sefina Rousseau. So I often speak about my fondness for the core set investigators for obvious nostalgic reasons, but I have to say, me and the unfortunately named Skids O'Toole never really got much table time together. It was nothing personal, of course, it's just that some of the other investigators showed me a little bit more leg. Now I look at him with fresh eyes, I think the jack of all trades rogue class was just in a difficult position with such a limited card pool at the time. Looking at his stat line, it's pretty even across the board, but notably that low willpower of 2 is less than ideal, compounded by his relatively poor sanity of 6. The intellect of 3 is an okay starting point, but only really functions as a secondary clue gatherer. The same with his acceptable combat of 3, which is complemented somewhat by his off-class choice of Guardian cards, which we'll come on to later. His excellent agility, on the other hand, suggests this is an investigator that prefers to run than fight. His signature ability could have been all sorts of awesome. Action economy is arguably the most important thing in the game, but paying 2 each turn to get an extra action is a steep price to pay. Don't get me wrong, it's certainly easier nowadays, so Skids is definitely someone that will have improved over time. But in the cold light of day, it's still too much to pay for the privilege. But if you couple him with Leo DeLuca and you can afford everything, then I can think of a lot of things I could do with 5 actions a turn. Skid's signature card, On the Lam, is an event. Wait, is that not just a skill card? Okay, yes, technically it's an event, but what the actual Donald is this? I think it might be the worst signature card we've seen to this point. I just can't think of a scenario where I want to spend $1 to pretend I'm invisible to only certain enemies for a turn. Now don't get me wrong, someone might get the math hammer and tell me why it's good value, but my response will be, can I borrow a pen so I can write skill on here somewhere? If only we lived in a parallel universe, eh? Does parallel in this instance translate to what could have been? Meh, I'm done talking about this. Thank God then that his weakness, hospital debts, is easy to deal. Okay, another one of those. If you draw it too late, you're a sad panda cards. Thanks, FFG. Draw it early and control when you pay off your debt, you can live with. But its main saving grace is that it's only tempo loss you'll suffer, as opposed to permanent damage if you don't deal with it. As I've already mentioned, his deck building choices of Guardian cards gives you cause for optimism that he can bash face as well as duck and dive. But is that what you really want from a vanilla rogue? I'm not sure. Now, the main win condition I see here is to lean heavily into generating resources and rush into the win condition, and there's only so much in the Guardian class to help you do that. So what does this all add up to? Well, I've not been particularly effusive about the pieces to his puzzle so far, but the fun and power in him is simply going to be taking 5 actions a turn if you can, and seeing how quick you can get the job done, which is clearly going to work better in solo, warranting a B for his on his lonesome viability. The fact that he needs to dictate his own pace doesn't necessarily work well with others, but extra actions is good at any player count. That being said, it also strikes me as a decent backup to cover up holes in a multiplayer lineup, meaning he still deserves an okay C when he's part of a group, likely being tasked with doing the dirty or unglamorous work that no one else wants to do, but with a raised eyebrow and a stern look on his face. But then along came Jenny from the block, aka Ms. Barnes, the dilettante, and the absolute Jane of all trades that came with her own separate bank account. This is what a you can be anything investigator looks like, and is in many ways what makes her so fun to play. Don't let her dress sense fool you, this cat came to play, and play hard. So to her stat line, if you like monocoloured patterns or you like just eating the red Skittles in the bag, then you're in a giggity country here, because these stats suggest she is absolutely average at absolutely everything. 3 willpower is fine without the need for buffing. It will keep her sane alongside her solid sanity, and her intellect is the very minimum you want if you're gathering clues. Now, for those of you that have watched my previous videos, you know I like an investigator that knows what they want to do. Stand toe to toe or turn your back and scalp her. So 3 combat and 3 agility would normally turn me off straight away. But as you'll soon come to understand, Jenny is all about the pump spells, giving her the option to take the most action economical path to dealing with foes. Her signature ability is just good all the time, and I'm all about praising that. If action economy is great, then straight up economy is also pretty good too. Maybe I'm over-egging the quality of this signature ability because I love effects that are reliable and consistent. But if I am, it ain't by much. And the fact that it opens up opportunities for a slightly higher resource curve is welcome indeed. Jenny's signature card, her twin 45s, is great too. Arguably the holy grail of +2 skill, +1 damage that you want from a weapon. And you get to determine its charges as well. With that one main downside being that they're two-handed. But you can't have everything now, can ya? Honestly though, giving her 5 combat without any further boosts and 2 damage makes this a standout. Her weakness, searching for Izzy on the other hand, is a bit of a ball breaker. There are a lot of variables in play here as to how hard this will hit, dependent on the location layout of the scenario and its resting place's shroud value. But worst case scenario, this hits hard with its mental trauma and can be tricky to deal with. But the good times had to be soured at some point, and this time it has a name: Isabel. Her off-class deck building choices couldn't be more synergistic with her overall playstyle if it tried. Yes, it's a shame they're only level 0, but there's still an abundance of choice on offer in that category, giving you the opportunity to play Guns Blazing Jenny or Bookworm Miss Barnes if that's how you want to play her. Contrary to Skids, I've been quite effusive about what our dilettante has to offer. That's because while she falls short of being called a sandbox investigator, you really can still tweak her somewhat to your preferred playstyle. The one downside being that with that much dilution and even-handedness across her stat line and the rest of her kit, it does mean she doesn't scale that wonderfully to the higher difficulty levels, because hitting the highest heights in any given skill test requires significant investment and the ability to draw just the cards you need for the task at hand. With all that being said, she's an absolute standout in solo play, comfortably deserving an A in this format. Yes, she's a little bit reliant on drawing the cards to make her Superwoman, but that's what mulling is for. We'll be giving her a slightly worse B in multiplayer because you just want someone that can do a specific task. However, she's fantastic as a backup investigator when there's more than one of you at the table. Which leaves us with just one investigator to discuss here, in the guise of the artiste, Sefina Rousseau. A lady that brings her own little event deck to every party she attends, and a healthy hand of cards to boot. In fact, she looks mighty like a mystic to me, but how can that be? She's got a green border and a paintbrush in her hand. Her stat line is the main reason she could be mistaken for another class. Having 4 willpower is great in dealing with the encounter deck, and her flip the script high sanity is a reason to feel extremely secure from any existential threat you might face. However, her paltry intellect and combat of 2 apiece gives me cause of concern when thinking of any potential viability in solo play. 4 agility is what you'd expect to reliably evade enemies, and so you can really have no complaints here. The signature ability on offer is where she really starts to paint the picture of what she can do. Load up on events, some consistent, some situational, and park him in her little mini deck. Don't get me wrong, 5 cards isn't amazing, but it's still 5 more than most investigators get, and the cost of an action to fetch one of your choice all seems about fair to me. Suffice it to say, there's a lot of brewing to be had here, and you'll need a critical mass of events to ensure you get a handful tucked away. I'm not even going to hate on the no mulligan stuff. The probabilities of a decent outcome still add up. Her signature card, the Painted World, which you get 3 of incidentally, is further event synergy, leaving absolutely no doubt whatsoever about what a Sefina deck is supposed to look like. Duplicating any event that already sitting under her own card. What this doesn't help mitigate is any cards you may have already taken from there. But the fact that there's 3 of them really does elevate the fact that signature cards can often go undrawn, with their potential going untapped, but rest assured you'll be seeing at least 1 copy of this during a game. Her weakness, Stars of Hyades, really does suck though. If it was one and done you can live with it, but its recursive nature is quite the sucker punch. The fact that you can pick and choose what you lose is really its only saving grace, but me no likey. Her off-class choice of mystic cards really does round out what is a highly synergistic investigator. At the very least, if her border ain't purple, she was always going to insist on having access to those coloured cards. It really doesn't need much further explanation. A mystic-like stat line accompanied by access to that class's cards. One thing's for sure, Sefina feels very much like she's ahead of the design curve with some of the other classes in the Path of Carcosa cycle. Not specifically an atypical rogue, but definitely one that thinks somewhat out of the box. That being said, she doesn't quite have enough passively or with all the events in the world to be more than a C in solo play. Again, I repeat, these are comparative viability grades as opposed to a direct indication of power, but this is plainly due to her volatile playstyle and low starting health. In multiplayer though, she excels, clearly warranting an A, thanks to her ability to self-sustain and support with her available event cards. There's no way she's not an asset to the team. So there you have it, your choice of the first 3 rogues ever printed on cardboard. Now there's no excuse not to get creative and take your favourite investigator for a spin. Stay tuned next week for part 2, but for now, I hope you found this helpful and I'll see you next time.